From the day Zinal graduated, her parents in Lagos told everyone she was the lucky one. She had a good job, a big salary, and to them that meant she was the family's lifeline. Every month she sent money home without question. At first, she felt proud that she could help. But one afternoon, she walked past her brother's room and heard him laughing with a friend. "Don't worry," he joked, "Zinal's our cash cow." The word stabbed her. She smiled as if nothing happened, but inside, something broke. From then on, she noticed everything differently. Each phone call from her parents ended with a request. Each message from her siblings carried the same words: "Zinal, send." She paid her sister's rent, her brother's school fees, even the mortgage for her parents' new house. She gave and gave, while her own dreams shrank into the background. She wanted to travel, to save, to start a small business, but there was never anything left. Year after year, she buried her needs under their demands, until her bank records told a story she could not ignore: more than $500,000 gone in just 8 years. Yet no one seemed to see her sacrifice. They only saw the money. That single word, cash cow, followed her everywhere, echoing in her head like a curse. And though she kept smiling on the outside, in her heart, Zinal knew the truth: they didn't love her for who she was. They loved her for what she could give. Zinal's life looked perfect from the outside. She had a good job, a steady income, and her family never stopped bragging about her. To her parents in Lagos, she was proof that their sacrifices had paid off. But behind the smiles and the proud words, Zinal was slowly being drained. Year after year, she carried the weight of everyone's needs on her shoulders. When her sister couldn't pay rent, Zinal sent money without hesitation. When her brother's tuition fees were due, Zinal cleared the bill before he even asked twice. When her parents decided to buy a new house, it was Zinal's account that made the dream possible. Every time they reached out, she answered, no matter how heavy the cost felt inside. She never complained. She never said no. On the outside, she laughed and smiled, but deep down she was exhausted. The life she wanted for herself kept slipping further away. She dreamed of traveling, of seeing new places beyond Lagos, of walking streets where nobody knew her name or expected her to fix their problems. She thought of starting a small business, of building something that was truly hers, something that didn't disappear into other people's pockets. She even dreamed of saving enough to buy her own home, a place of peace that she could call her own. But those dreams never stood a chance. Each time she put a little aside, another phone call would come. Another emergency. Another, "Help us, Zinal." She told herself it was love. She told herself family came first. But slowly, the truth began to show up in numbers she couldn't ignore. Her bank account was bleeding. In just 8 years, she had sent away more than $520,000. The figure made her heart stop the first time she added it all up. $500,000. Enough to build her dream business. Enough to buy a home outright. Enough to create the freedom she longed for. Instead, it was gone, scattered into rents, tuition, loans, bills, and endless requests that never seemed to end. What hurt her most was not the money itself but the silence that followed. There were no thank yous that matched the sacrifice. There was no real concern about how she was coping or what she was giving up. Her siblings boasted about how lucky they were to have her, her parents smiled proudly when they talked about her job, but no one ever asked about her dreams. It was as if her only purpose was to provide, and everything else about her, her hopes, her feelings, her exhaustion, was invisible. Still, she stayed quiet. She smiled at family gatherings. She nodded during phone calls. She told herself it was enough to be the one they could lean on. But deep in her chest, a quiet ache grew stronger every day. And though no one could see it yet, Zinal knew that something inside her was reaching its breaking point. That night started like many others, with Zinal's phone buzzing on her nightstand. She picked it up expecting the usual, a request for rent, tuition, or bills. But this time it was her sister, laughing on the other end, asking for money to throw a birthday party. Not for school. Not for something important. A party. Zinel froze. Her chest tightened as she listened. She had given for years, even when it left her with nothing, but this moment broke something inside her. She hung up, dropped the phone, and sat in the dark. Tears rolled down her face as she realized a truth she had been running from: they didn't love her for who she was. They only loved the money she provided. She opened the family WhatsApp group, scrolled through months of messages, and her heart sank. Message after message was the same: Zinel, send. Zinel, help. Zinel, can you transfer? Not one of them asked how she was doing, if she was eating well, if she was happy. Not one message said, "How are you, sister?" Or, "We're proud of you." It was all about what she could give. She felt trapped, chained by her own kindness. The group that should have been a place of love and laughter had become her prison. Every ping of a new message was like a shackle tightening around her wrist. That night, she cried until her pillow was soaked. For the first time, she let herself feel the anger she had buried under duty. She thought about the dreams she had killed, the trips she never took, the business she never started, the savings she never built. All sacrificed for a family that saw her as nothing more than an endless source of money. She whispered to herself, "This cannot be my life. I am not their bank. I am not their cow." But she knew simply walking away would not heal her. She couldn't just disappear and leave them to gossip and twist the story. She wanted them to face the truth. She wanted them to see the weight of what they had done. She wanted them to look at her not as their savior but as a woman who had been used and drained. In that silence, something powerful grew inside her: resolve. She wiped her face, sat up straight, and made a decision. She would not keep suffering quietly. If her family had turned her into their provider, then they would also have to face the cost. She would show them everything they had taken, every sacrifice they had ignored. And when the moment came, she would make them see it with their own eyes. That night, in the quiet of her room, Zinel stopped being their silent sacrifice. She began to plan her freedom. And she swore to herself that the next time they called her a cash cow, it would be the last time. Zinel did not change overnight. To her family, she still looked like the same obedient daughter who sent money whenever they asked. She still smiled during phone calls, still replied in the family WhatsApp group, still said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." But behind that calm voice, she was building something they could never imagine. Quietly, she began collecting every single record. Each bank transfer was printed, each bill carefully saved, each payment to her siblings or parents documented. She even added the dates, the reasons, and in some cases the messages that came with them. When she had free time at night, instead of watching TV or scrolling on her phone, she sat at her desk with a stack of papers and a pen. Slowly, a thick file began to grow. She worked like a detective, adding not just the amounts but also the interest those sums would have earned if she had saved them. Line after line, page after page, the truth was laid out in black and white. Every dollar, every cent, accounted for. Nobody in the family knew she was keeping receipts all along. To them, Zinel was still their generous, lucky one, the one they could rely on. But to herself, she was preparing her escape. The more the file grew, the calmer she became. She no longer felt helpless when her phone buzzed with another demand. She would transfer the money, then calmly add it to her records. Each entry was like a secret weapon. She stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling like a woman preparing for war. The weight of years of silence was still heavy, but now she had proof. Proof they could not deny. For months, she kept this secret. Nobody suspected anything. Her siblings bragged about her support, her parents praised her sacrifice, and all the while, Zinel nodded politely, hiding her growing file in a locked drawer. She knew there would be only one moment to reveal it, one stage where they could not run, could not pretend, could not twist her story. That moment came when her father announced his retirement and planned a big family dinner in Abuja. Everyone would be there. Her parents, her siblings, their friends, relatives, the perfect audience. Zinal prepared carefully. She placed the documents into a clean white envelope, thick and heavy with 8 years of sacrifice. She even had it signed and stamped by a lawyer to make sure they would understand this was not a joke. When she held the envelope in her hands, she felt its weight, not just of paper but of everything she had carried in silence. She smiled as she slipped the envelope into her bag that evening. On the outside, she was still their loving daughter. On the inside, she was ready for her moment. At her father's retirement dinner, when they would all gather to celebrate, Zinal knew she would finally reveal the truth, and no one would see it coming. The night of her father's retirement dinner in Abuja was full of laughter, music, and clinking glasses. The family was dressed in their best clothes, proud smiles on their faces, telling stories about the past and joking about the future. Zinal sat quietly at the long table, watching them, her smile gentle but her heart steady with a plan only she knew. For once, she wasn't nervous. She had carried their weight for 8 long years, and tonight would be the night she finally set it down. As the food was served and wine flowed, her parents beamed at her, calling her their rock, their pride, the child who had never failed them. Guests nodded and clapped, raising glasses to honor her. But then her brother, half drunk with laughter, lifted his cup high and said the words that cut sharper than a knife, "We'd all be nothing without our cash cow." The hall erupted in laughter, but for Zinal the word rang louder than the music, louder than the chatter, louder than everything around her. Cash cow. Again. The label that had followed her, burned her, and kept her chained. Only this time, she did not swallow the pain. She did not hide behind a smile. Calmly, she pushed back her chair and stood. The laughter slowed. One by one, faces turned toward her, confused by the sudden silence. Her hand slipped into her bag and rested on the thick white envelope she had carried all evening. She didn't rush. She didn't shake. She looked at each of them, her parents, her siblings, the people she had sacrificed everything for, and let the silence grow heavy. The atmosphere shifted. The room that had been filled with joy now felt cold and tense. Her mother frowned, her father's smile faded, her brother's drunken grin froze in place. Everyone waited, unsure of what was about to happen. Zinal took a deep breath. Her voice was steady, almost soft, but it carried through the hall. "You've called me many names. Rock. Lucky one. But one name has never left me. Cash cow." Her eyes lingered on her brother. "Tonight, I will answer to it for the last time." Gasps broke the air, whispers rustled across the table. Zinal pulled the envelope from her bag and placed it gently on the table in front of her parents. The sound of paper hitting the polished wood was louder than any slap. Her hand stayed on it for a moment, steady and sure, as if sealing years of sacrifice into one final act. Nobody spoke. The laughter was gone. The music in the background seemed too bright, too out of place. Every eye was on the envelope, and every heart in that room knew something had shifted. Zinal stood tall, calm, and unshaken. For the first time, the weight was no longer hers. It was theirs. And the night that was meant to celebrate her father would become the night they would never forget. The room was frozen when Zinal slowly pushed the thick white envelope across the table. Every eye followed it as it slid to a stop in front of her father's plate. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. With calm hands, she tapped it once, as if to remind them it was real. "Open it," she said softly, her voice carrying through the silent hall. Her father hesitated, but the tension in her eyes told him she was not playing. His fingers trembled as he tore the seal. Inside was not a letter, not a greeting card, not a family gift. It was a detailed invoice, page after page of figures, transfers, receipts, and interest, all neatly arranged and signed by her lawyer. At the bottom, the total stood bold and undeniable, $520,000. A lifetime of sacrifice written in numbers they could no longer ignore. Gasps echoed around the table. Her mother's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate, the sound startling in the heavy silence. Her father's face drained of color, his proud posture collapsing as he scanned the pages. Her siblings leaned over his shoulder, whispering, flipping through the thick stack of receipts that spelled out their greed. Zinel smiled, not with joy but with freedom. For 8 years, she said clearly, her eyes moving from face to face, you called me your cash cow. Tonight, I give you the bill. Consider this my final contribution. The words landed harder than any shout. The hall was silent except for the rustle of papers in her father's shaking hands. Her brother opened his mouth, but no words came. Her sister lowered her head, ashamed. The proud family that had once joked about her sacrifices now sat in stunned silence, trapped by the evidence they could not deny. Zinel stood straighter, her calmness unshaken by their shock. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, and now it was real. She had been their provider, their savior, their so-called lucky one. But tonight, she had turned the mirror back on them. They were no longer laughing. They were no longer proud. They were exposed. Her father finally looked up, his lips pale, his voice weak. Zinel, he began, but he couldn't finish the sentence. The words seemed stuck in his throat. For the first time, he saw his daughter not as his provider but as the woman who had carried the weight of them all. Zinel did not cry. She did not shake. She simply stepped back from the table, her eyes steady and clear. The silence stretched, heavier than ever. The envelope lay open, spilling pages of truth across the tablecloth, and for the first time, the burden was not hers to bear. It was theirs. The night they called her a cash cow was the night she finally handed them the cost, and walked away with her dignity intact. The silence after Zinel's words was sharp enough to cut through the air. Her family sat frozen, their eyes wide, their mouths half open but unable to speak. Then her brother broke the stillness, stammering, "It was just a joke, Zinel, we didn't mean it like that." His voice cracked, desperate to soften the weight of what had just happened. Her sister quickly joined in, whispering excuses, shaking her head, her eyes darting around the table. "You know we love you, Zinel. We never meant to hurt you." But their voices sounded small, weak, and hollow. For years they had laughed, mocked, and demanded, and now those same words turned into flimsy apologies that carried no power. Just as they tried to gather themselves, the sound of footsteps echoed at the door. Every head turned, and in walked a man in a dark suit holding a slim black folder. He nodded politely toward Zinel and then faced the family. "Good evening," he said firmly. "My name is Mr. Adewale. I am Zinel's lawyer." Gasps spread across the room as he stepped closer, placing the folder next to the white envelope that was already lying open on the table. He opened it calmly, sliding out a set of stamped legal documents. "These are official," he said, his tone steady, his presence commanding. "Every amount you see in those pages is backed by records. This is not a request. Repayment is not optional." He looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes, his words cutting through their whispers. "For 8 years, you relied on her kindness. Tonight, the law demands accountability." Her father's hands shook as he flipped through the stamped papers. Her mother leaned back, her face pale, unable to hide the shame. The siblings who once called her cash cow now sat trapped, their pride gone, their excuses useless. They whispered frantically, some pleading, some trying to argue, but the lawyer's calm authority left no room for denial. The very people who drained her dry now faced the weight of a system that would not let them walk away. Zinel stood quietly, watching, her expression calm but unyielding. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. For years she had carried the burden in silence, but now the burden had shifted. Her family squirmed under the pressure, panicked by the realization that the life they had enjoyed at her expense had finally come with a price tag they could not ignore. The lawyer gathered the documents neatly and gave one final nod. "You will be contacted for repayment schedules. The law will take its course." His words left no space for argument. The collapse had begun. The proud, laughing family who once saw Zinel as their endless provider now sat broken in their own shame. And for the first time in 8 years, Zinel felt light, free, and untouchable. Zinel didn't wait for another excuse, another cry for pity, or another half-hearted apology. She had heard enough. Slowly, she rose from her chair, her face calm, her body steady. The room was still heavy with silence, her family's shame clinging to the air like smoke. Without a word, she reached for her coat draped over the back of her chair. The sound of the fabric brushing against the wood was louder than their whispers. Everyone watched, but no one dared to stop her. She slipped her arms into the coat, lifted her chin, and looked at them one last time. In their eyes she saw fear, guilt, and the weight of truth they could no longer escape. For years they had laughed at her, taken from her, depended on her like she was nothing but a bank machine. Tonight, that illusion shattered. They weren't in control anymore. She was. With measured steps, she walked to the door. Each click of her heels against the floor echoed like a drumbeat of freedom. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her final act had already been written across their faces and in the thick envelope lying open on the table. Outside, the night air felt cool and new against her skin. She breathed deeply, as if for the first time in years. In her bag was her passport, her ticket to Cape Town, and the promise of a life she had built for herself, one filled with savings, a waiting business partner, and dreams no one could steal. For 8 years they had called her their cash cow. Tonight, she walked away as something far greater, a woman who finally chose herself.